The engines did not fail. They were silenced. At dawn outside Chartres, General Marcus Hale stood alone in his command post, staring at a fuel report that felt unreal. For weeks, his army had moved like a force of nature, faster than orders, faster than fear. Enemy lines had dissolved ahead of them. The road to Germany lay open, and then, without a single shot fired, everything stopped. Steel giants built for speed sat motionless in the fields. Crews waited beside tanks that could no longer breathe. A modern army, reduced to stillness by a decision made far from the front. Hale understood the truth immediately. This was not defeat. This was restraint. And restraint, at this moment, was more dangerous than any enemy. He did not rage. He did not protest. That night, by lamplight, he opened a private diary and wrote what he would never say aloud, about momentum, about betrayal, about a war that had been slowed just as it was ready to end. Those pages were never meant to be read, but they would come to matter more than any official order. If you want more stories that uncover the hidden moments where history truly turns, subscribe to the channel and help us keep making them. Quick question for you. Was stopping the advance a necessary caution or a tragic mistake? A. Necessary caution. B. Tragic mistake. Comment A or B below and tell us why. Momentum is not speed alone. It is belief made visible. In those weeks, General Marcus Hale watched something rare take shape on the roads and fields of France. His army was not just moving forward, it was pulling the future toward itself. Units advanced so quickly that maps became outdated within hours. Enemy formations did not regroup, they evaporated. Prisoners arrived in numbers so large they felt unreal. Men surrendering not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they no longer believed resistance mattered. This was not a traditional campaign, measured in lines, gained, and positions held. It was a psychological collapse, unfolding in real time. Hale sensed it in the faces of his soldiers, who no longer asked how far they would go, only how fast. Confidence spread faster than orders. Every mile taken without a fight whispered the same dangerous, hopeful thought. The war might end before winter. Veterans knew how fragile this moment was. Momentum does not survive hesitation. It exists only while it is used. Hale understood that no plan could manufacture what now existed on its own. It had to be spent, immediately. Before the enemy found the time to think again, this was the kind of opportunity commanders wait a lifetime to see, when movement becomes destiny, and victory feels less like conquest than inevitability. It was not loud, it was not glorious, it was simply there, slipping forward, asking only one thing in return: do not stop. Fuel is never just fuel. In modern war, it is intent made liquid. General Marcus Hale had built his army around movement, steel, men, and doctrine all assumed one truth, that motion itself was a weapon. But motion survives only as long as gasoline flows. When it stops, power does not merely pause, it collapses inward. A tank without fuel does not intimidate. It waits, it blocks roads, it becomes a target. Hale understood this in his bones. Cutting fuel was not a logistical inconvenience. It was a strategic statement. It said the future would be defensive. It said speed was no longer trusted. It said the moment would be allowed to pass. As fuel allocations tightened, the transformation was immediate and cruel. Engines that had thundered for weeks fell silent. Crews cleaned machines they could not move. Commanders planned advances they were forbidden to execute. An army designed to outrun the enemy was ordered to sit still and think. That thinking, Hale feared, was exactly what the enemy needed. Gasoline does more than move tanks. It denies the opposition time. Take it away, and you hand them the one resource they cannot replace. History often reduces war to strategy and leadership. But Hale knew the truth was simpler. Without fuel, modern war loses its sharp edge. And in that quiet space between empty tanks and full intentions, Momentum dies, not in battle, but in waiting. The diary was not an act of defiance. It was an act of survival. That night, after the maps were folded and the radios went quiet, General Marcus Hale sat alone with a small leather-bound notebook he had carried for years. It was the one place where rank dissolved and honesty remained. He did not write for history. He wrote because command leaves thoughts with nowhere else to go. The entries from that night were raw in a way official language never allows. Hale did not soften his words or weigh them for approval. He wrote what he felt as momentum slipped through his fingers, frustration sharpened by clarity, anger restrained by discipline, and a growing sense that something irreversible had just occurred. What emerged on those pages was not a rant, but a reckoning. Hale questioned judgment, priorities, and the strange distance between those who fought the war and those who managed it. He wrote about speed wasted, about opportunity traded for caution, about the loneliness of seeing what others chose not to see. Most of all, he wrote because he believed the diary would die with him, that these thoughts would never escape the margins of his own mind. He was wrong. Those pages would outlive orders, briefings, and carefully written histories. And when they surfaced, they revealed something unsettling. The truth of war is often whispered in private, long before it is denied in public. The order would have been easier to accept if it had come from a stranger. Instead, it carried the weight of history. Robert Keene was not just a name on a directive. He was a voice Marcus Hale had trusted for decades. They had once shared ideas about how future wars would be fought, about speed, audacity, and the belief that hesitation was the most dangerous enemy of all. Those conversations had shaped Hale's career. They had shaped Keene's as well. That was why the decision cut so deeply. Hale did not read the order as a matter of authority. He read it as a reversal of everything they had once agreed upon. It was not simply that the advance had been halted. It was that the man who understood why momentum mattered had chosen to abandon it. There was no shouting, no confrontation. Hale was too disciplined for that. But in the quiet space left behind, something fractured. Trust does not break loudly. It erodes in silence, when shared assumptions are quietly withdrawn. Hale knew Keene was balancing forces far beyond the front. Alliances, expectations, political realities. He did not deny the burden. What he could not forgive was the cost. Decisions made to preserve harmony were now asking soldiers to pay with time, and soon with blood. When an order comes from an enemy, it hardens resolve. When it comes from a friend, it leaves a scar that never fully heals. The shift did not happen all at once. It crept in quietly, disguised as promotion, responsibility, and the slow turning of careers. Years earlier, Marcus Hale had been the one explaining war to Robert Keene. Hale had come up through command, mud, engines, men moving under fire. Keene had listened closely then, absorbing ideas about speed and shock, about how hesitation could undo even the strongest force. Hale remembered those conversations clearly. They had felt like shared convictions, not passing theories. Now the hierarchy had inverted. Keene's authority no longer came from the front, but from above it. His power rested in coordination, diplomacy, and the fragile mathematics of alliance. Hale's power still lived where it always had, at the edge of movement, where decisions were tested immediately and mistakes were paid for in blood. Being ordered to stop by a former student struck at something deeper than pride. It forced Hale to confront a painful truth, that experience does not always outrank position, and that modern war often elevates those farthest from its friction. The man who had once learned from him now set the limits of his action. Hale did not resent Keene's success. He resented what it had cost. Knowledge earned in motion had been overruled by caution learned in offices. The mentor had become subordinate not because he was wrong, but because the war no longer rewarded the kind of certainty he possessed. That reversal stayed with Hale, not as anger, but as a quiet realization that authority and understanding are not the same thing. And in war, confusing the two can be fatal. "I am fighting everyone at once" was not a complaint. It was a diagnosis. Marcus Hale felt it settle over him in the days after the halt, a pressure that came from all directions at once. The enemy was still there, wounded but dangerous. That part he understood. What unsettled him was everything behind the lines: orders layered with conditions, permissions tangled in politics, allies who spoke of unity while quietly pulling in opposite directions. The war had multiplied. Hale was expected to confront the enemy with resolve, reassure partners with patience, satisfy superiors with restraint, and somehow preserve momentum without being allowed to use it. Each demand contradicted the next. Speed was praised in speeches, but punished in practice. Initiative was celebrated until it disrupted balance. In his private reflections, Hale admitted what he could never say aloud. The greatest resistance he faced no longer wore a uniform across the front. It came in the form of hesitation, compromise, and fear of criticism. The machinery behind the war had grown so large that it began to resist its own success. Command, he realized, is loneliest when clarity is isolated. Hale could see the shape of the war changing, feel opportunity slipping away, and yet remain bound by forces that insisted this was necessary. Fighting one enemy is war. Fighting 5 narratives at once is something else entirely. In that moment, Hale understood the cruel irony of modern conflict. You can defeat the enemy in front of you and still be overwhelmed by everyone standing behind you. Victory did not disappear. It was postponed, politely, deliberately, and for reasons that had little to do with the battlefield. Marcus Hale began to see the pattern clearly. Decisions were no longer framed around what would end the war fastest, but around what would keep everyone satisfied longest. Every move was weighed against alliance harmony, public perception, and the fear of appearing reckless. The war had entered a phase where winning too decisively, too visibly, was considered a liability. Hale understood coalition warfare. He respected it, but he also knew its danger. When politics becomes the lens through which every tactical choice is filtered, urgency fades. Momentum is treated as negotiable. Risk becomes unacceptable, even when it offers resolution. What disturbed Hale most was how easily caution dressed itself as wisdom. Delaying action was described as prudence. Restraining success was called balance. Meanwhile, the enemy, freed from such considerations, was allowed to recover quietly. He did not believe Robert Keene intended to prolong the war. Hale believed something more subtle was at work: the belief that victory must be managed, shared, and paced to preserve unity. But wars do not reward careful choreography. They reward decisive pressure applied at the right moment. Politics seeks stability. War seeks conclusion. Hale saw the cost of confusing the two. By choosing political equilibrium over decisive action, leadership had not avoided danger, it had merely deferred it. And deferred danger, Hale knew, always returns with interest. The nickname was never meant to be clever. It was meant to be honest. Marcus Hale did not use it in public, nor did he whisper it in hallways. It appeared only in the privacy of letters and diary pages, where language could finally match feeling. The name he chose for Robert Keene was sharp, almost playful on the surface, but beneath it lay a deeper judgment. It suggested a man carried forward by circumstance rather than command, by timing rather than trial. For Hale, the nickname captured a growing disillusionment. Keene's rise had been accompanied by favorable press, polished appearances, and the quiet applause of allies who valued reassurance over risk. Meanwhile, Hale measured success in miles taken and opportunities seized. The contrast became impossible to ignore. The nickname was not born of jealousy, it came from frustration. Hale believed that war rewarded those willing to bear its weight directly. When leadership drifted toward symbolism and balance, away from decision and consequence, something essential was lost. In those private pages, the nickname became shorthand for a larger fear, that the war was being guided by men protected from its friction. Hale never spoke the name aloud because he understood its power. To say it publicly would have been an accusation too large to retract, so it remained where truth often survives longest, in ink meant only for the writer. And in that silence, the nickname said everything Hale believed could no longer be said. Marcus Hale did not need a briefing to see the flaw. He saw it the moment the outline of the new plan crossed his desk. On paper, it was elegant, clean arrows, precise timing, a promise of a dramatic breakthrough that would look decisive from afar. But Hale had learned long ago that war does not reward elegance. It punishes rigidity. This plan demanded perfection, perfect coordination, perfect timing, perfect luck. And Hale knew that perfection is the one thing war never provides. What troubled him most was not ambition, but inflexibility. The plan allowed no room for friction, no margin for the unexpected. It assumed the enemy would remain confused, passive, and slow to adapt. Hale knew better. A wounded enemy is not a helpless one. Given time, it learns. Given space, it hardens. From observation points near the front, Hale could already see the consequences forming. Enemy engineers worked methodically. Defensive lines thickened. Artillery positions reappeared where none had existed days before. Each hour of delay made the next advance more expensive. Hale wrote privately that the plan confused boldness with spectacle. It sought a dramatic ending rather than a decisive one. The tragedy, as he saw it, was not that the plan might fail, but that it required sacrificing a real collapse for a theoretical victory. Some plans fail because they are reckless. This one, Hale believed, would fail because it was too carefully imagined and too far removed from the ground where wars are actually decided. Watching the enemy recover was harder than watching them fight. From his forward positions, Marcus Hale could see the change happening in small, irreversible steps. What had once been disorder began to take shape. Trenches deepened. Supply routes reappeared. Artillery that had vanished in the retreat returned, carefully positioned, methodical and patient. The enemy was no longer running. They were preparing. This was the true cost of the pause. Hale understood that armies do not heal through strength alone. They heal through time. And time was the one thing his halted advance was now providing in abundance. Every day of stillness allowed the enemy to replace panic with planning. Every night, without pressure, restored confidence that had nearly collapsed. What haunted Hale was how preventable it all felt. Weeks earlier, these defenses had barely existed. The ground ahead had been open, undefended, fragile. Now it hardened before his eyes, not through brilliance, but through opportunity handed to it. He wrote that delay does not reduce casualties. It relocates them into the future, where they multiply. Soldiers who might have advanced against confusion would now advance against preparation. The difference would be paid in blood, slowly and relentlessly. Victory had not slipped away yet, but its price was rising with every passing hour. Hale could feel it in the air, in the tightening front, in the knowledge that wars rarely forgive those who pause at the wrong moment. When the plan collapsed, Marcus Hale felt no relief, only a hollow certainty. Reports arrived in fragments at first, objectives delayed, timelines slipping, resistance appearing where none had been expected. What had been promised as a decisive stroke unraveled, not with chaos, but with slow, grinding disappointment. Hale had seen this ending weeks earlier, and knowing it did nothing to soften the blow. There was no satisfaction in being proven right. when the cost is paid by others. The failure did not restore momentum to his own forces. It only confirmed what had been lost. The war did not snap back to its earlier shape, it thickened. Progress became deliberate, cautious, and bloody. Battles now required preparation instead of speed. Gains came measured in yards, not miles. Hale felt the weight of that transformation deeply. Vindication arrived stripped of meaning. His judgment had been sound. But judgment alone does not end wars. Lives do. And now, more of them would be spent to reclaim ground that had once been open. What followed was worse than failure. It was inevitability. Winter loomed, and with it, a kind of fighting everyone had hoped to avoid. Hale wrote that being right without the power to act was its own kind of defeat. Not dramatic, not public, just enduring. In war, vindication offers no comfort. Victory does, and Hale understood, with painful clarity, that one had been allowed to replace the other. The diary survived because it was never meant to. Marcus Hale did not write those pages for history, for justification, or for revenge. He wrote them to empty his mind of thoughts that command would not allow him to speak. He believed the notebook would remain what it was intended to be, a private record, folded away with the war itself once the fighting ended. But time has a way of choosing its own witnesses. Hale did not live to see the diary made public. Robert Keene moved on to a different kind of legacy, one shaped by speeches, photographs, and official narratives. The war settled into textbooks, its compromises smoothed into reasoned explanations. The fuel crisis became a footnote, a disagreement among professionals. Nothing more. The diary refused that simplicity. When its words finally surfaced, they carried the voice that official histories rarely preserve, the voice of doubt, anger, and unfiltered conviction. They revealed a war influenced not only by enemies and courage, but by caution and politics. They showed how easily opportunity can be sacrificed without appearing to be lost. Hale's diary did not rewrite the outcome of the war. It did something more unsettling. It questioned the cost of how that outcome was reached. Long after the engines fell silent and the decisions were defended, his private words remained. Asking a question history prefers to avoid, not whether the war was won, but whether it could have been ended sooner, and at far less cost. Marcus Hale's story is not one of defeat, nor even of victory delayed by chance. It is the story of a man who recognized a decisive moment when it appeared and was forced to watch it pass untouched. He commanded momentum when momentum was rare. He saw an enemy unravel before it understood its own collapse. And then, at the precise moment when action mattered most, he was ordered to wait. What makes Hale's journey enduring is not his anger, but his clarity. He understood that wars, like lives, do not offer endless windows of opportunity. Timing is not a detail. It is the difference between resolution and prolonged struggle. His diary reveals a leader wrestling not with fear, but with frustration born from knowing that caution, when applied at the wrong moment, can be more dangerous than risk. Hale did not believe politics were evil. He believed they were misplaced. He saw how the desire to balance interests, preserve harmony, and avoid criticism quietly transformed momentum into hesitation. The war was still won, but it was won later, at a higher cost, and with scars that might have been avoided. The lesson reaches far beyond the battlefield. In our own lives, careers, leadership roles, relationships, we often recognize moments when progress is real and conditions are aligned. Too often, we hesitate, waiting for perfect certainty or universal approval. Hale's story reminds us that opportunities rarely announce how fragile they are. Delay can feel responsible, even wise, but it can quietly reshape outcomes in ways we never intended. The challenge is not reckless action, but decisive action at the right time. Knowing when to move and having the courage to do so may be the most important leadership skill of all. Quick question for you. When opportunity appears, what matters more? A. Acting decisively, even with risk. B. Waiting until every concern is resolved. Comment A or B below. And what's your perspective? Was Hale right to believe the war could have ended sooner? Or was caution unavoidable? Share your thoughts in the comments so others can learn from your view. If stories like this help you think more deeply about history, leadership, and life, subscribe to the channel and support us so we can keep creating powerful content like this in the future.